welcome to Impossible Live. Welcome back. And I hope you have a pen and a paper nearby because today's guest, lots of fabulous energy and will not fail to delight. And at the same time, I really have to thank Diane for joining us today and for helping us come up with such a cool topic. I had the pleasure of meeting wonderful Diane in Positive Intelligence's community, in the DEIB community of practice. And I what I love about meeting Diane is at the time there were so many members of the community of practice, but we didn't necessarily have a chance to really have a private conversation. So delighted that Diane and I finally had a chance to catch up, and delighted that you're joining us today. And Diane, please introduce yourself so that our listeners know exactly where to find you.
Hey Mel, thank you so much firstly for having me on this show. I just love the opportunity to be with you and share some time with you. As Mel mentioned, my name is Diane Chang. I am a third generation Chinese South African who, like Mel, happens to be a coach. We both are very familiar with the positive intelligence concept when we met. And I also coach around executive coaching. And one of the disciplines that I learned through my coaching journey is the neuroscience behind conversations and conversational intelligence. And so when Mal asked me to join her today, I thought about the link between conversations, trust, neuroscience, and positive intelligence, and thought that that might be something that we could talk about.
That is fabulous. And in this process, amazing, Diane. And let us know, our listeners who are joining us live, let us know where you're joining us from. And if there's a question that you have around the topic that we can help you weigh into, what I love about Diane's amazing background, and you'll see it because her website is under her name. Diane's got these mad coaching skills. Ah, Diane, you mentioned conversational intelligence. How'd you get involved in that?
Yeah, so when I first got certified as a coach in 2015, I continued to look for more and more ways to engage in the coaching community and to learn more. And I came across this certification program called Conversational Intelligence for Coaches. And basically, it's about the neuroscience behind conversations. And it really fascinated me to learn more about it. And I took the certification course in 2018. And then I've since been using it in my practice. And what really resonated with me around this is the one quote that I learned from it. And that one quote is this: getting to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture, which depends on the quality of the relationships, which depends on the quality of the conversations. Everything happens through conversations. And this is from Judith Glaser, who started the program. Unfortunately, Judith has since passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2018. However, her work lives on through all of us who have learned from her, and always have a place for her in my heart. I managed to meet her in person, and I just always am eternally grateful for the fact that this concept was introduced to me. And how it ties back to trust is, to create a culture of trust, we need to build relationships. And to build relationships, we do that via conversations. And so this is why, to me, it just comes full circle around the work that we're doing in positive intelligence and trust as well. So that's how I came about it a few years ago. And as I said, I've been using it in my practice all along as well.
That is fantastic. And two of our fans, there's lots of sage energies in the house. We have amazing Raymond joining us, and also Shanti.
Hey,
Uh,
Raymond. Hey, Shanti. So nice to see you both.
thank you both for joining us and for your amazing energies. And Diane, I love the part about, I think people lose sometimes the part that our culture and our conversations are kind of intertwined. And like you mentioned, that trust becomes a part of it. I
Mm-hmm.
think, and what I loved is when you first mentioned this topic, you talked about the neuroscience part of it, which reminds us of all that stuff that's going on in our heads, that we're not necessarily, and I'll say it straight up, I'm just back from our annual physical with our doctor. And I'm reminded of her scientific expertise and how they look at all the different little parts of it. But I think the parts of our brain really contributing to this. I'm grateful, as you said, for mentioning Judith Glazer, but also for everybody else who's contributed so much to kind of the school of thought around this, because we don't necessarily think of how much our brain is involved in whether we actively or passively participate in any sort of culture, and the same way within a relationship.
Exactly. And it's not only trust that we have with each other, it's trust that we have in ourselves too. And one of the artifacts, one of the things that I learned through this is Judith has created something called a trust dashboard. And so if you can imagine a dashboard, on the one end of the dashboard, it's low trust. And the other end of the dashboard is high trust. And in the middle is conditional trust. So when we're in low trust, we are skeptical, we're resistant, and as we know, we get an amygdala hijack. We freeze, we fight, flight, freeze, and appease, right? And that's the low trust element of it. Low trust in the other person, low trust in the situation, and low trust in ourselves. And then maybe as trust builds up, we go to this wait and see, this conditional trust, and maybe we're willing to just, play it out for a little bit. Ideally, we want to move ourselves to the other end of the dashboard, which is high trust. And that's the area in which we can collaborate and experiment. And that's where, from the neuroscience perspective, that instead of generating an amygdala cortisol attack with our primitive brain, we're actually generating oxytocin through our executive brain. And so when we feel trusting and we feel trusted, we can better tap into our executive brain, and the neuroscience helps us to think more clearly. And tying it back to positive intelligence language, when we're in low trust, we might find ourselves in saboteur mode. And we're in high trust, we might find ourselves in sage mode. And that's really just the beauty of it all. And tying it back again to conversations, it's conversations that we have with ourselves and others, and the words we use and the tone that we use that develops or erodes that trust. And so I absolutely love the dashboard because it just resonates with us to say, where are we in this dashboard? And I know, Mel, when you and I first met and started to talk, we didn't know each other. And so maybe we were in conditional trust. Let's like wait and see how this goes, right? And then very quickly, we just were able to connect very, very quickly. And we moved it to high trust. We moved it to let's experiment, let's co-create. And it could have gone totally the other way, right? It could have been, and then we could have gone into low trust and really resisting the opportunity to do this together as well. So I just wanted to
Mm.
share that dashboard and how pivotal it is in understanding the connection between everything as well.
Oh, I love that. You're reminding me of Yvette Bessel of Organizational Soul introduced me to her pillar of trust. And as part of the pillar, she has a spiral of trust. So what I
Mm.
love about the dashboard you just mentioned is in Yvette's spiral, we have deep connected trust on top. And on the bottom, we have intense distrust. And
Mm-hmm.
that middle level that you mentioned about conditional trust on Yvette's spiral is kind of a no trust, no distrust.
Mm-hmm.
So I really love what you're saying about the conditions part, because I think that's really where our brains come in, our instincts come in, our processing, and in some cases, whether we're in a non-sage perspective, so to speak, whether and I love what you're saying about it, because especially in relationships that are kind of new, and
Mm-hmm.
I really love that you're mentioning conditional trust, particularly from the perspective of conversations I've been having with a lot of HR professionals. We're talking about the challenges sometimes of onboarding. And I love that you're introducing me to conditional trust. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. And the other thing I was thinking about as you were talking about it, what's going on in the world today. There's so many reasons to have distrust, right? There's so many reasons to have distrust in others, and valid reasons to have distrust in others. And I think what I was trying to process through this is, well, we can't simply just trust everyone in every single situation, right? And so there's really trying to figure out when we want to try and establish immediate trust with an individual, like when we first meet someone, if we can very quickly come to a place of trust, we can very quickly interact with them and create cultures that allow us to work well together. having said that, when we are in a state of distrust, it's really hard. And not to be naive about things, right? We can't always feel like we can trust everything and everyone in every single situation. And it got me to thinking about the fact that in those situations, when maybe we feel that we cannot trust another individual because of things that are going on, what we need to go back to is learning how to trust ourselves. And then trust ourselves in knowing that instead of getting an amygdala hijack in the state of distrust in the presence of this person or the situation, instead of us getting that amygdala hijack and freezing and fighting or freezing or peasing, right? That all those words, we want to re-engage our trust in self so that we can engage our sage and establish what it is that we want to do proactively to respond to that situation of distrust. So we can think more clearly about what we want to do. And maybe in that moment, in our clarity of thinking, we say, oh, we've got to fight, we've got to flee, right? We know, having said that, it's just a different place in our mind that we're coming from. So I was really thinking about the fact of, distrust and trust. Because with distrust, as with this positive intelligence dashboard, with distrust, we trust, one of the concepts is that trust changes our reality. And so with distrust, we reveal less. That's the REALITY. We reveal less. We expect other people to make mistakes, right? I don't trust you. I know you're going to mess up in this particular situation. Maybe we expect ourselves to make mistakes. We assume the worst. We look with caution. We interpret with fear. We tell secrets, and we yes people. We just agree because we're afraid to do anything else. Whereas when we are in a state of high trust, the reality is we reveal more, we expect the unexpected, we assume the best, we look with an open heart, we interpret with the facts, not with interpretations, we tell the truth, and we say yes not to people, we say yes to truth telling. And so there's just like so much power in how trust can change our reality of a situation as well. Yeah,
I
so yeah.
love in your description and your share of that, of the invitation to re-engage trust, and really to start from our core, from where we are. I think that was one of the gifts for me from positive intelligence. Was it really helped me start exploring the concept of vulnerability.
Mm.
And uh, and during our foundational program, I found myself kind of pausing a little bit. And the good news was there were enough people who I knew pretty well in our group to be able to say, hey, something's causing me to hit a little bit of a pause button. And I'm laughing because obviously Monday is our landscaping day. All of a sudden the development. So for those of you who can hear the background on our end, the tropical breezes, hang in there and bear with us. But I think that the reminder that when we pause, there's something else behind it. That if we stay deeply into that fear lane or that resistance lane, we really
Mhm.
will move very far away from it, and we kind of remove from ourselves and remove from the opportunity to kind of explore what's causing
Mhm.
us to feel that way. So I love
Yeah.
that you're mentioning it from the perspective of, how we're responding to it, and to really say, I really enjoyed in some of the neuroscience of trust work that I was looking up, and I appreciate you mentioning it because you reminded me to look, and I found some other research by Paul J. Zak,
Mhm.
who had done a lot of research for Harvard and Department and Center of Neuroeconomic Studies. And in the process, I found so much data about
Mm.
how we look at this. And I think in many cultures, whether we're leaders, whether we have different roles, different participant, different levels of participation, we don't really explore what's causing us to feel some kind of way. So I really wrote that down, and it'll be in caps now, Diane, about the re-engaged trust as an opportunity to kind of figure out what is also affecting our self-trust.
Mhm. Yeah. And when we think about our self-trust, oftentimes we start to judge ourselves, right? I don't trust that I'm good enough. I don't trust that I'm smart enough. I don't trust in ourselves as well. And that really is a big key to when we can overcome that, we can build our self-compassion, and we can actually start to learn to trust ourselves, so that even when things don't go well, we can figure out, okay, how do I overcome this? And then I can trust in my ability to overcome these things. There's just so many elements of trust, that, when you think about it as well. Yeah, yeah,
You're also
yeah,
mentioning a really deep aha, which is the process of learning to trust.
yes.
I think sometimes we think of things that shake our trust, that
Mm-hmm.
shake our foundation, change our lens or our perspective. But I do think in some cases, and especially from a cultural perspective and from a workplace perspective,
Mm-hmm.
that opportunity to learn to trust. If
Mm-hmm.
someone feels that they're in this hijack mode that we're talking about, are there ways other than some of the tools we've learned in positive intelligence, to pause and kind of shift to sage to kind of change the narrative? Are there things that you suggest that others can do in this process of learning to trust and exploring it?
Yeah, yeah. Trust is so quickly eroded, right? And so hard to rebuild again. And I think it all starts with really understanding the other person's perspective. It all starts with empathy. Really understanding, what is it, right, that has me, about that person, that I don't understand, that maybe has that distrust form, right? What do I not know them well enough? Maybe they don't know me well enough, and maybe we don't understand each other's intentions as well. So if I can understand maybe what their intention was, maybe the way in which they said something, maybe what they did, maybe they just weren't thinking about it deeply enough, and so really getting to understand their perspective first, I think is a one way to establish or start to rebuild that trust. Having conversations, having really deep conversations about saying, when that thing happened, or when you said that thing that you said, when I said the thing that I said, I know that in that moment we there was a trust factor in that. I know that that moment we started to maybe erode the trust in each other. Let's talk about this a little bit more. And it just goes back to those conversations. And then having conversations where instead of simply telling while we're sharing information, also asking questions around certain things as well. And I think, yeah, I think it for me, just because we're talking about this, it all goes back to enhancing the quality of our conversations, the tone, the words we use, the questions we ask, how we ask those questions. I think when we can start there, we can develop trust. I know that these days there's so much happening in the world now, with especially in corporate, where there's a lot of layoffs and redundancies, and it's very hard for people to trust in leadership and to trust in their colleagues, and everyone is looking out for themselves potentially, right? And really asking ourselves, how do we figure out how we can be transparent to the degree that our role allows us to be. Being transparent about the fact that, hey, I know that this is scary, I know this is frightening, and here's what I can share with you, and here's what I still can't share with you. So being transparent to the degree that we can is a huge aspect of building trust, I believe. um, Relationship building as well, just trying to figure out if I can build that relationship, right? Understanding, just using the trust, understanding the other perspective, really trying to understand that other perspective, looking for our shared interests. What is our shared success? How can we know that there's something that we both want? What is our shared aspiration about that as well? And then at the end of the day, telling the truth, right? Truth telling. And we all know when we start to lie or hear lies or believe that we're hearing a lie, or when we make assumptions about things, right? So really tell the truth and focus on what are the facts. I think are ways to build trust as well. Yeah, I don't know, Melanie, if that's answering your question as well. Yeah.
I really appreciate also from the perspective of just the topic of assumptions, and it's been coming up more and more as people are sharing their reactions to artificial intelligence.
Yes.
To and was having a conversation with a new client recently about someone whose knowledge base Two people were in a
Mm.
situation where they had a very different knowledge base, and one of the people was discovered later that the knowledge base, they basically were looking a lot of things up on artificial intelligence
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to having a lot of actual practice. It really,
Mm.
in in that case, kind of damaged the potential for a transparent relationship,
Mm.
because one person was book smart, so they could tell you where the footnote was from, or whose quote it was from, or what book they had read, or what school of thought, and the other person was unable to share the resources. I think the assumption part, and Shanti's mentioning it also, from that transparency and the vulnerability part. But we don't feel people are transparent, and
Yes.
in some cases the willingness to be vulnerable. In some
Yes.
cases we're not taught as children to be as transparent, and I can think of it sometimes in a professional setting. I had an employer who, he was more interested in your vulnerability than in your transparency. He
Mm.
needed to know what piece of information you were going to share with him, that he could use it later, and he was a very skilled negotiator. And I found it interesting. He really was rarely transparent,
Mm.
and in our conversations, it was kind of interesting working with him, because everyone around him was transparent. He was mostly interested in vulnerability, but everyone else around him, I met his family, siblings, his wife, everybody else was transparent. So I think sometimes there's the opportunity to learn from those around us who have a different style, whether it's a conversational style or a learning style. There's that
Mm-hmm.
opportunity in there. When you mentioned before, learn to trust.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think some of us really, I had to learn how to trust, because I had only worked with bosses and leaders that I trusted before that. He was the first person. It was a totally different school. I didn't think I was going to make it past the first 2 weeks,
Yeah. Gosh.
because just the environment was very, very different. I ended up staying 13 years, and learning a lot. But I think I learned a lot. Um, I think I learned a lot because of the difference in styles, and
Mm.
it made it harder in relationships where he introduced me to someone.
Mm-hmm.
That person, then we would end up having to have a conversation without him around, so you almost could have a real conversation in your own
So
styles,
interesting.
which is kind of
Yeah.
which is kind of an interesting thing. It was challenging, because in a group situation, you're hoping, okay, here's a new team member, and you're just hoping it's going to work. But really, we ended up having to work overtime on our relationships in his absence.
Gosh. Wow. And it just shows a leader that maybe doesn't show that or create that environment of psychological safety for people. And so you've had to like double up on and do the work outside of it. Yeah. And it's so interesting now because as you're talking about it, then, he didn't create a feeling of trust. And when we on that trust dashboard, when we're in low trust in that area, we just want to protect ourselves. We want to protect ourselves. We want to protect the people around us. We want to protect the situation. And it felt like you needed to protect yourself. Whereas when we're in the high trust, you don't feel the need to protect. You just feel the desire to just collaborate and partner with people rather than it felt like there wasn't this partnership that you could have with your leader at all in that moment. Yeah, very low trust in what he might do with information that you might share in your state of vulnerability as well. Because vulnerability as a leader is a strength when we can say, you know what, I really don't know what's going on. I really don't understand the situation. This is pretending that we know everything. It's more like when people use that vulnerability against you. I think that is the concern. Like if I can't be vulnerable because that is going to be used against me in that moment. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And a warm, warm welcome, Annie. Thank you for joining us and bringing us from some love from across the pond. Annie Osung is in the house on LinkedIn. Tremendous energy. I think also a reminder is, Diana, it really is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that employer did show me a lot about vulnerability. He also taught me, I I think previously I had been in work situations where vulnerability was rewarded. We
Mm.
understood that we couldn't always be transparent because of different levels of management. Some people were involved in, financial stuff and planning. They were working months ahead of many of us. But I think that vulnerability and the transparency part, I have to remember to keep continuing this discussion with Diane. And Raymond is asking us, do you think AI helps you to practice how to develop trust in conversations?
Mm. Mm. That's a great question because AI is so prevalent, right? I think it all goes back to how we're using AI. What are the quality of the conversations we're having with AI, so that AI brings the quality of conversations back to us. I think we can have conversations with AI that maybe aren't the ones that help us to develop that trust as well. So I think, I don't know if that's answering your question, Raymond, if it's a cop out. Having said that, it really is about AI. If you think about AI, we're constantly having conversations with this chatbot, and it's constantly returning things back to us. And so how do we test the, not only its output to say, is it going to help me to develop better conversations, is, am I having a trusting conversation with the bot itself? Keep it questioning and asking it questions too as well. Yeah. The other thing, Mel, that I want to bring up is just taking it to the neuroscience and neuroplasticity of things. When we're in a situation, because our brain remembers things. And so when we are confronted with someone or in a situation where trust was eroded, that kind of puts something in our brain, right? We make an association. Oh, when I'm with this person, or when I'm doing this thing, or when this happened to me, I had this negative reaction. And so it's wired in my brain now to remember this particular instance. And now when I am confronted with something similar, I immediately put up my guard because I'm cautious about something that's going to happen. And so we need to also recognize that, in that moment, something is happening. Maybe we under low trust or wait and see. And what is it that we can do to really recognize that we may want to rewire our brain around something, that we may want to rewire that association, because maybe it doesn't always mean that I cannot trust this situation. I cannot trust this person. I cannot trust myself. Oh, I cannot trust myself to act appropriately in this environment because the last time I did it, I messed up, right? Just reminding yourself that we can undo those negative messages that we've sent to ourselves as well, so that we can engage from our executive brain rather than from our distrustful brain, of ourselves in the situation as well. So I just wanted to talk about the neuroplasticity around all of this and how we want to ensure that we all appreciate the fact that we have neuroplasticity and leverage it as much as we can to.
I think that's one of the things too in Raymond's question, and I know Jay also has a question too about trust and boundaries in the age of AI. I also think because of how we're individually wired,
Mm-hmm,
and because of an opportunity that we have to change
mm-hmm,
how we respond in a situation, what we share in a situation, to express when we're comfortable or uncomfortable in a situation. I I think also that the plasticity part, and I'm able now to identify it, that this was
mm-hmm,
the first employer I had who didn't really reward vulnerability or transparency in others. And I think it actually ended up affecting the plasticity part of building a culture, not only of trust, but a culture of
mm-hmm,
innovation. People were terrified to suggest new ideas. They weren't sure how they would be received. And also, Raymond and Jay, thank you so much for your comments about AI. But I think what you're mentioning about neuroplasticity, Diane, is reminding me of the conversations I've been having with a lot of people around our healthy
mm-hmm,
boundaries.
mm-hmm,
As we're reinforcing what feels healthy for us in a wide variety of environments or a wide variety of situations. And for myself, I had to really explore healthy boundaries to start using AI. And I do
mm-hmm.
conversations. And I don't use it in conversations because I think, like you said, because the plasticity, there's the muscle memory part that people are now starting to talk about in terms of chat gpt and the upgrade to chat gpt 5, that some people felt, in it, we might rush out in some
Mm-hmm.
cases to buy a new Apple product or a new Apple device. And some of the people who tried chat GPT at a higher level, they wanted to go back to the level that had a little bit of the neuroplasticity that Diane is actually mentioning. So I love that you're reminding us of the flexibility part, that just because our brains are involved, none of this has to be hardwired.
Mm-hmm.
We have the opportunity to relax. We have the opportunity to lean in. And thank you, Barbara. We've got lots of sage energy in the house. So Barbara's mentioning that some messages are harder to undo than others.
Mm-hmm.
And wow. And I'm wondering, Barbara, if they're external messages or internal sometimes. Because I think sometimes that was one of the things from getting deeper into emotional intelligence. Like I love how Diane mentioned the conversational intelligence lens, but because of of my deep dives in trust, looking at it through the lens of emotional intelligence, I think I was always reminded there was something in there that I was able to change, because learning that trust was an emotion was really important to me. Um, Jay's also mentioning that it takes courage to trust something or someone. And Jay, I think during your birthday week, that's a mic drop. It does take courage to trust. And and I think also, Jay, and from the beginning of what Diane mentioned to us, we need to learn to trust. And part of that may involve us learning to self trust. So finding the courage, and I'm wishing this to Jay as it's his birthday week, finding the courage to trust Jay. And as Jay trusts in the Force, because he's a Star Wars guy, he's a Jedi, trust in Jay's internal force also
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
part of it.
Yeah, and I also think that when we think about, I keep on going back to the trust dashboard because it really does ground me in many ways. Now about thinking about this, when we want to use the full trust dashboard, low, conditional and high, and ideally we're always in situations where trust is high. Having said that, we want to consciously know when we might want to be in conditional trust, when we might feel low trust consciously rather than subconsciously, or rather than just by default having low trust. Because sometimes there's that default behavior where I don't trust this person, I don't trust this thing, where maybe um, it's not helping us because as a default versus what I'm thinking about this, and from a sage perspective and from my executive brain, I know that this is a situation in which I feel that I cannot trust this thing that's going on in this individual. I think it's just very different, the mindset with which we find ourselves in the dashboard, because I think that we need to find ourselves in all um, kind of places on the dashboard, and understand where and why we are there as well. Yeah.
I have to really thank you for that. I'm in the process of finally finishing up my advanced trust facilitator
Yay.
certification project, and one of the things, we had a team meeting kind of to help me wrap up part of the project. And in the process, what Raymond said, that part about developing trust in ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes there are conversations we need to have with ourselves as part of this,
Yeah.
that's a big part. I think I had to learn, and I'm appreciative for the trust certifications. I had to learn to create a culture of self trust for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to learn that through this lens of healthy boundaries. And at the same time, as Diane's mentioning about the conditional, the conditional trust,
Mm-hmm.
I think I had that sometimes, conditional trust of myself.
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes you're in a situation and you're not necessarily sure of the answer, or someone or something is really affecting whether we're showing up from that vulnerable perspective or from the
Mm-hmm.
transparent perspective. It used to take an hour to an hour and a half, and sometimes even longer than that on the commute home for me to kind of flip the switch and kind of almost decondition from some of, as Barbara said, some messages were harder to undo than others. I remember one night and this was shortly before I stopped working at this particular company. We were waiting large family dinner, and we had forgotten to make a reservation, and it was one of those like buffet nights at a local restaurant, and we're listening to music for about 2 hours. I think it had taken me the 45 minutes of traveling and 2 hours of listening to music to really be able to
Mm-hmm.
consciously relax. And I think Jay is really at a crossroads as he's approaching his birthday of exploring trust and what it means from a neurodiverse perspective, from a cultural perspective. But I think, Jay, your question about there's, I think in the vulnerability part of who we are,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna put Jay's question up. I think that is a question. The older I get, I don't ask myself this question.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked for 13 years in this situation in which vulnerability and transparency weren't encouraged, or they weren't necessarily appreciated on a day-to-day basis, I think that's the last time that I felt I was in a situation in which someone was taking advantage of me. I knew that
Mm-hmm.
anything we mentioned personally became a weapon for that person to use later. And I think, as Diane's saying, the opportunity is when Jay shows up and Jay's in a high trust space, feeling like the world is his, approaching relationships from that perspective with confidence, with the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to explore the relationship, to really see someone eye to eye, or
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge and create, as Diane mentioned, the psychologically safe space for a relationship to develop. I think you'll ask yourself that question a little bit less. If when you meet someone, your curiosity is not, oh, wow, what's your name? Where are you from? What's your favorite color? If our curiosity about the humanity part, the excitement part of meeting another person, if we stay in that lane,
Mm-hmm.
we're in the higher trust lane that Diane mentions on the dashboard. You have an
Yeah.
opportunity for a relationship and deep connected trust. And the playing field starts kind of equal, like you starting from a place where there's no distrust, and your curiosity about whether trust will be in a long-term relationship. Sometimes it just takes the time to see that. And I think it also depends sometimes on where we work, whether you're working with people of uh, of different across different shifts,
Mm-hmm.
across different ages, different genders, with different voices. uh, I think it really can change that lens, because,
Mm-hmm.
like Raymond said, Diane said, it really starts with developing the trust in yourself. It allows any conversation to continue, or for you to pause and become a really great active listener. Diane, I'm not sure if I covered Jay's distrust from a conversational intelligence perspective.
Yeah. I think you did, Mel. You know, we when we meet people for the first time, we don't know, right, whether they're going to take advantage of us or not. Having said that, if we go into the conversation with that mindset of, oh, I don't know if I can trust this person, we will automatically go into this protect mode, which prevents us, to what you said, trying to understand, trying to ask questions, get curious about that. So maybe start with giving them the benefit of the doubt, or go and see rather than low trust. Let me just give them the benefit of the doubt. Let me see how this relationship unfolds as well. And then Barbara has written, some messages are harder to undo than others, right? So if you've heard a message or you've said something that maybe erodes trust, or someone has said something to you that erodes the trust, maybe it goes back to having conversations with that individual and say, when I said that thing, I know that I might have given the impression of, or vice versa. So it always goes back to developing our conversational skills. And when we develop those conversational skills coming from a place of empathy, asking questions, getting curious about things versus getting into that tell mode as well. In conversational intelligence, it also talks about 3 levels of conversations. One is level 1 is tell, like just tell, yell, sell syndrome, which is could be negative unless we just really are just exchanging information. The second level is positional, my way or your way, and we're having an argument about which way to go, versus having a healthy debate in level 2. And the third level is co-creating, just being open to co-creating. Having said that, the unhealthy mindset of co-creating is we're brainstorming so much that we just never come to a decision. And so it really is trying to understand that each of these, when we are having conversations, we can be in one of 3 levels of conversation, each of them having a healthy mindset or an unhealthy mindset. And so, when we can really try to figure out what is the conversation that is being had right now, and then ask ourselves, how do I then transform this conversation into a more curious one as well?
I think there's a rich gift in there, Jay. And I'd encourage you also, when you have a chance on LinkedIn, check out Diane's amazing blogs. And Diane, where's a good place for our guests who are just getting to know you to find you and discover more about you?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. My website is dianechancoaching.com. And on there, there's a newsletter that you can sign up for. So feel free to sign up for my newsletter as well, if you're interested in learning more about this and just general topics about leadership and executive presence and executive leadership and mental fitness as well.
Thank you also for reframing just that art of conversations too, from the perspective of how we approach each other,
Mm-hmm.
and the reminder that there are at least 2 sides of every coin in a conversation. I really appreciate that lens you just gave us for approaching different conversations, because I think the encouragement to explore, and at the same time, I understand when Jay was saying sometimes you're not in a situation where you're necessarily feeling comfortable enough to explore. It may require some privacy, it
Mm-hmm.
may require some time, it may require others to be around from an external support perspective. And I think sometimes too, when we meet people and we're not sure if our sense of them is accurate, get some rest. Get some rest, take a nap, take a change your perspective, change your approach. And and maybe the next time, if you're the person who initiated the conversation, give them a chance to start the conversation on their end. See if you have the same feeling, because I think, as what Diane's reminding us, is we have different lenses. We can shift that lens of conversation, of what's happening in our brain, and give ourselves a chance to create a genuine relationship.
Absolutely.
Wow. Diane, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today, and for a
Thank
chance
you,
to
Mel.
get to know you better. And I'm looking forward to your next newsletter. And you just launched your newsletter. You just launched it this spring.
Yeah, it's about, I think we're in our 4th episode, so we do it every month. Around about the 15th of a month, a new newsletter comes out. And yeah, it's been a fun journey, coming up with topics and thinking about things that are worth sharing, or having people think a little bit deeper about something that maybe they forgot to think about as well.
Well, that is wonderful. We are looking forward to your new episode, to your August episode, and to catching up shortly. I
Thank
also
you.
want to just thank you for just always for the great care that you have in approaching relationships and creating spaces for us to kind of to connect and to grow. There's a wonderful grace with which you do that, and I just really needed to say thank you for that today. Extremely
Oh,
grateful
thanks,
for you.
Mel. Thank you. Likewise. Likewise.
And thank you to our guests who are joining us. Feel free to share today's episode with someone else you know who can benefit from a different way to frame a conversation or to frame a brainwave, and reach out to amazing Diane, not only just for her mental fitness gems, but for her conversational gems, and check out all those cool certifications. And we want to thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope you have a magnificent day filled with opportunities and possibilities. Stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, and stay in touch. Take great care. And thank you again, Diane, for joining us.
Thanks, Mel.